And in this edition of Jews in the News, first one after Passover, so it's been a couple weeks, and we're only going to have two more, uh, and then we're going to be off for the summer, Memorial Day through the summer, unless something comes up that I wanted to share. With enough notice, I'll let people know, but otherwise we'll be off from Memorial Day through Labor Day. So what I wanted to talk about today is these college campus protests and to kind of get an understanding about them. And first of all, I just want to put it within a context, the Jewish context of protest, and how the idea of standing up for what is right, which also implies protecting somebody else or something from harm, is an ancient Jewish tradition that is found actually in this week's Torah portion. So, as I said in Minyan this morning, this week's Torah portion is Kedoshim, which is found in the middle of the Torah, and for the rabbis, that means it's the most important section in the entire Torah. And Kedoshim means, in this context, it can be a noun. Yes, it is a noun, but it's used as Kedoshim Tihiyu, you shall be holy. And it's plural, so addressed to the entire community of Israel, Kedoshim, you shall be holy. Now, it just so happens that Kedoshim can also be translated as martyrs. So today is Yom HaShoah. We read the portion, the beginning of the Kedoshim at the service this morning, because Monday is a Torah reading day. As we remember, the 6 million martyrs of the Holocaust. So the portion Kedoshim is known as the Holiness Code because, unlike the portion Mishpatim in Exodus, which describes the civil law code, here in Leviticus, it's put in a way that these are the things that you're supposed to do, or the opposite, refrain from, in order to maintain a holy society and be a holy person. And one of the commandments, well, the most famous of all the commandments, and the portion is, V'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha, you shall love your neighbor as you would be loved. Okay, it's kind of like the golden rule. All right, so that's found in this week's portion. But also, what was found in the same paragraph with that, love your neighbor as you would be loved, is al ta'amod al dam reyecha, which literally means don't stand on the blood of your fellow human being. So, v'ahavta l'reyecha, love your neighbor, love your fellow human being. Al ta'amod al dam reyecha, it's the same word. Don't stand on the blood of your neighbor, your fellow human being. So what does that mean, to stand on the blood of someone? So it's understood by the rabbis to mean that don't stand idly by if something is about to happen. Okay, so usually that's how that's translated. It's not translated literally, but don't stand idly by when trouble is coming to your neighbor or your fellow human being, which means you're supposed to be an advocate. That if, so in one context, it means if someone literally is going, you see clearly and unambiguously that someone is about to harm or more, to do harm or more to someone else, if it's safe for you or in a safe manner, you're supposed to intervene. That's what that means, but it also is extended to be the rallying cry for actually to rally and to protest. about social justice issues. So to rally for Israel, to rally for Soviet Jewry back in the 70s and 80s, to rally for the people of Darfur in southern Sudan, to rally for gun control, to rally for the poor, to rally for civil rights. All of that and more could be under the rubric of al ta'amod al dam reyecha. Okay, so, and that is how it's understood by all within the Jewish community. So the sense of social justice and social advocacy is one element of it is based on that verse from Kedoshim. So protest, to stand up again within understanding that to advocate, to save someone, to protect someone, it's all about whether it's safe to do so. Okay, so you're not supposed to put your life in danger in order to save somebody else, but you're supposed to do as much as possible, as humanly possible, and as safely as possible to protect somebody else. And so when it comes to protests, then it should be assumed that when one is advocating a particular social justice position, one is doing so without threat of bodily harm or vandalism or any other kind of illegal means. All right, so just as it is incumbent upon us to prevent something illegal, dangerous from happening to somebody else, so too we are not supposed to engage in anything illegal or dangerous. Now, we're allowed to, so let me just clarify that statement in this way. If someone's coming to kill somebody else, clearly, unambiguously, and you give a warning, hey, you're not supposed to do that, you're about to kill somebody or murder somebody, you know that you could be executed for that, you're supposed to do all that, give that warning. If the person's still planning to do that, you have the right to murder them. Okay, so the use of bodily harm and violence is okay for the sake of saving somebody else from imminent death. Okay, so that gives the right then for the state of Israel to have an army. And it goes against the Christian idea of turning the other cheek. So Judaism has never been pacifist. Judaism has never been aggressive and offensive, but has certainly said in the name of defense and life, one is allowed to use physical harm. Okay, so just with that clarification there, when someone's life is in danger, your own or somebody else's, you're allowed to use physical means, violent means, to protect you or someone else. Okay, but when it comes to protest, like march here in Washington, D.C., marching on the mall, one is not allowed to do that violently. So that goes against Jewish values. We are not allowed to harm somebody else. So clearly when one is protesting, the point of the protest is not supposed to be to inflict damage, bodily harm, or anything else illegal. One can and should protest legally. One should stand up for ethical, moral, social justice values. Absolutely. Okay, so that is how I and most people understand that verse, al ta'amod al dam reyecha. It's a defensive, understanding it from defensive, and understanding it in a positive way of standing up for the rights of others in a uh, legal, nonviolent way. So, with that being said, we have to understand about these college campus protests that have spread across America the past few weeks. And I wanted to share two articles that help us understand what's happening with these protests. Now, college campus protests, I guess many of us could remember or can associate the Kent State students shot by the National Guard, right? Students protesting the Vietnam War, right? I So I was 4, 5 years old when that happened, so I don't remember it personally, but certainly I read about it, and I can picture in my mind's eye the picture of the student with who has just been shot, and other students, a student or a couple of students gathering around that stricken student. So it's an iconic image of the anti-war protests of the 60s. So I believe, yes, Bess?
You know that 3 of the 4 students that died were Jews?
Okay, right. So that's
Proves it.
my point, but there doesn't necessarily prove I guess you could ask them, were you supporting the verse al ta'amod al dam reyecha? That's not the point. The point is, I believe they were protesting peacefully, as opposed to these college campus protests now that are not peaceful. They are using illegal means to protest. First of all, it's not just college students or other college affiliated people protesting. There are outsiders who are brought in to engage with these students in the protest. Okay, so for example, the Columbia University and City College of New York protests that New York City Police Department came in and arrested people. Almost half of the people they arrested were non-Columbia and CCNY affiliated people. Okay, so that's number one. Now that doesn't mean, if a protest is popular, certainly it would be open for other people to come in to join in this peaceful protest. Okay, so there wouldn't necessarily be anything wrong with that. However, pictures have come out about what the protesters were trained to use in their protest, and what graffiti they sprayed in buildings on Columbia's campus. Swastikas were drawn on some classroom walls. And what do swastikas have to do with pro-Palestinian protests? If you're protesting to raise awareness about the death of tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza, whether that number is true or not. But if you're protesting about the death of innocent civilians in Gaza, Gesundheit, sure, protest about that and raise awareness about that. But what does a swastika have to do with that, unless the intent of the protest is to be anti-Semitic, not just anti-Israel? Okay, so that's one element of the protest. So I'd like to share two articles. First, they're both short. One is from Wall Street Journal, and one is from Barry Weiss's The Free Press. So let's go here, share. Okay, so this was from, when was it from? May 3rd. Okay, so 3 days ago in the Wall Street Journal. So for the longest time, I just want to acknowledge bestseller always clipped out articles from the Wall Street Journal for me to read that she thought would be important for me to read or might be interesting for me to read because she knew I did not have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. I finally gave in a couple of months ago just because I had seen that a lot of articles, journalists, opinion writers for Wall Street Journal I happen to agree with their perspective in their coverage of Israel's war with Hamas. And so I decided to pay for a digital subscription. So I kind of missed the pile of clippings that Bess would leave for me, but now I can read the Wall Street Journal on my own. So for me, it's worth the subscription.
You think I could get a commission?
Just the fact that I named you, Bess, and cited you, that's okay. So this article written by three people, activist groups trained students for months before campus protests. Okay, so point number two, these are not spontaneous protests. Okay, so sometimes some of the like the anti-communists, like bring down the Iron Curtain in Poland and Czechoslovakia, right? Back in the 90s, those were spontaneous protests and garnered lots of support for that, right? Because of the timeliness of it, and how important it was to the lives of the people, and that brought about permanent change in those countries. So this, it'd be one thing if the students themselves on their own were protesting. Depending what students protest, that either gets a lot of support or no support. But that's kind of like what college campuses are about. You walk through a college campus and you expect to see some kind of signs, slogans, people with banners talking about, representing, like remember Tibet, or I don't know, some other kind of social justice issue, or Harvard for climate change or advocacy or something like that. You'd expect to see that as you walk through a college campus, right? And student groups arise like overnight and are allowed to like be incorporated or whatever on the college campus to advocate whatever kind of position it is that certainly is not, that doesn't take a violent stance and doesn't advocate or use hatred of another group in the process of their protest, right? So that's what college campus is all about. It opens people's minds and eyes to things that maybe people hadn't been aware of before, wherever they came from to this college campus. That's the beauty of the college campus. But this is different. So the recent wave of pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses came on suddenly and shocked people across the nation. But the political tactics underlying some of the demonstrations were the result of months of training, planning, and encouragement by longtime activists and left-wing groups. At Columbia University, I don't think that means to be disparaging left-wing groups. It's just a description of where on the political spectrum these groups fall that are part of the training of these protesters. At Columbia University, in the weeks and months before police took down encampments at the New York City campus and removed demonstrators occupying an academic building, student organizers began consulting with groups such as the National Students for Justice in Palestine, veterans of campus protests, and former Black Panthers. They researched past protests over Columbia's expansion into Harlem, went to a community meeting on gentrification and development and studied parallels with the fight over land between Palestinians and Israelis. They attended a teach-in put on by several Black Panthers who told them about the importance of handling internal disputes within their movement. Okay, so they did a lot of research. Okay, nothing necessarily wrong with doing research if you want to figure out how to have a successful protest. If you want to achieve results as for your protest, then okay. So I was just reading what Bess wrote in the chat. So they researched past protests of a right, said that. We took notes from our elders, engaged in dialogue with them, and analyzed how the university responded to previous protests, said Sueda Polat. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, a graduate student and organizer in the pro-Palestinian encampment. Okay.
But they only consulted with groups that were on one viewpoint.
Okay, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Well,
Okay, again, if it's peaceful, it doesn't matter. Okay, people are allowed, if it's peaceful and non-violent and not using hate, you can say whatever you want. You can say 2 + 2 = 5. You can say, you can rally for 2 + 2 = 5. What's wrong with that? I mean, it's factually wrong, but does it harm anybody? You asking that the whole mathematical system be overturned for 2 + 2 = 5? Or you're just being fun and saying 2 + 2 = 5. Nothing wrong with that. You can say, I love Palestinians. There's nothing wrong with saying I love Palestinians, right? But if you say I love Palestinians and paint a swastika at the same time, that's wrong. So, and there's nothing wrong with asking advice and doing research and seeing how other pro-Palestinian groups have rallied before. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that if your intent is not to use violence and not to spew hatred. Though there isn't a centralized command overseeing the student movement opposing Israel's invasion of Gaza, there are connections between long-standing far-left groups and the protesters. The National Students for Justice in Palestine has been around some 2 decades and has more than 300 chapters across the U.S., many of which have helped organize the college encampments and building occupations. NSJP has for months called on students to stand strong against colleges until they divest themselves of investments in entities doing business with Israel. Again, there's nothing necessary, though I don't agree with it, obviously. I'm opposed to BDS, a boycott, divestment, sanction movement, because the language that they use happens to be not just anti-Israel, but anti-Semitic. In general, though, there's nothing wrong in advocating for such a tactic of divestment. One could also argue for a divestment from corporations that are not good for the climate, are not green, right? So there, if you just happen to be if you want to be pro-Palestinian and you think that investing in West Bank companies, Israeli-owned West Bank companies, is wrong, well, I would disagree with you, but I could understand your position. Okay, so advocating for BDS, boycott, divestment, sanction, you walk a fine line between being pro-Palestinian because you support a 2-state solution and you think the Palestinians have a right to their to autonomy in the West Bank, and therefore you think that Israel investing there goes against that idea of a two-state solution, then okay, that's about as limited as I would understand that the right of that kind of protest. But as we know, the BDS movement is more than that. Its social media pages have become a scroll of encouragement to protesting students, with videos showing activity at encampments and around the world. As early as October, the National Students' Justice in Palestine was promoting a day of resistance with demonstrations at colleges. Okay? Over time, the messages from the national group became more pointed. The student movement for Palestinian liberation will not be silenced. We will escalate until our demands are met, NSJP posted on social media on April 25th. Okay, so it's been brewing for months and then organized in a way to start being more pronounced. That same day, April 25th, on X, the group which was formerly Twitter, the group posted drawings with friendly advice to protesting students. One suggested they wear comfortable clothes and running shoes and bring water, an energy bar, and a bandana in case of surveillance. Right? So, in other words, it's one thing to suggest wearing comfortable clothes and running shoes, just to be how to dress if you're going to be protesting all day, but and water and an energy bar, okay, but a bandana in case of surveillance. Why would you want to protect your identity and cover up in that way, unless you think what you're doing is wrong and that you're going to be arrested for it? So in other words, peaceful protest is about the intention of not. Well, let me say this. I would understand. There are those who have protested in front of the former Soviet Union embassy in D.C., protesting right in front of the entrance to the embassy without a permit. And people had done that in the 70s and the 80s. And if you're protesting in that way, the peaceful, demanding the release of Soviet Jews, and that's with signs and banners, you're not saying, anything. The unlawful thing you're doing is that you don't have a permit. You're planning to get arrested then, so I guess it's a slippery slope. Is that kind of protest okay versus this protest? See, this protest intended to do other things violently. The only thing rabbis and other Jews who were protesting in front of the Soviet Union embassy in D.C. Decades ago, the only thing they were doing is that they didn't have a permit to do that, and they wanted to get their voices heard. All right, so that kind of arrest, civil disobedience, is one thing. An arrest over causing violence is a different kind of arrest. Okay, so I would say, I guess my point in bringing all that up is, it's not necessarily wrong to intend to know that your protest might lead to arrest, but it depends on how you're doing it and why you're being arrested. Okay. If someone is arrested, this is what they said with their advice: don't linger too long or pigs will kettle the march. All right, so just the fact that in the advice they're referring to the police as pigs already is wrong. Okay? I would, referring to a crowd control tactic. Free the comrade, or else get their name and birth date for jail support and keep it moving. On April 29th, the group announced a new chant on social media: no divestment, no commencement. Okay, so in other words, intending to block what already had been planned and permitted, and in coordination, the Columbia, let's say Columbia University, for example, or their own designating the area where the commencement's going to take place in coordination with security from their own police department and the New York City Police Department. So anything that would try to impede commencement from happening would be illegal, because there wouldn't be room for that with these for those for protests like that to happen. So if they're advocating for interrupting the commencement, it's one thing to interrupt with chants. It's another thing to interrupt, prevent the commencement from happening. That's different. University administrators have been concerned that coming graduations could be interrupted by protesters. Some of the group's campus chapters have been suspended by universities, including at Columbia. For the last decade, donations to NSJP have been received and administered by the Westpac Foundation, according to Howard Horowitz, Westpac's board chairman. The donations are passed on to NSJP for projects in the United States, he said, declining to provide further details. Westpac, a nonprofit based in Westchester County, is decades old, according to its website. It has supported humanitarian causes, as well as organizations that propagate anti-Semitism, according to the ADL. Westpac has posted support of pro-Palestinian protests on social media and posted videos in which protesters held signs that referred to President Biden as Genocide Joe. Okay, so just a term like that as part of a protest to call the president, say that the president of the United States supports genocide, that is over the line, and that is wrong and shouldn't be allowed. Robert Herbst, a representative for Westpac, said Westpac has not coordinated, trained, or strategized with protest participants, nor do we support organizations that have supported violence, anti-Semitism, or terrorism. In March, there was a Resistance 101 training scheduled at Columbia with guest speakers, including longtime activists with Sami Doon, Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network, a Vancouver, British Columbia-based group that celebrated the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. So, a Resistance 101 training with this Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network. The administration twice barred the event, citing some of the organizers' known support of terrorism and promotion of violence. Columbia students hosted the event virtually nonetheless, which prompted Columbia President Shafiq to suspend several of them. Okay, so this happened back in March, and we might not have been aware that this happened back in March, but this happened. The Columbia tried to stop this because of the hatred that's behind, right, the inappropriate nature of this organization, that Columbia students were warned that that is not a Columbia-sanctioned event. During the session, which lasted nearly 2 hours, Sami Doon, the coordinator, Charlotte Cates, encouraged students to build an international popular cradle of the resistance, according to a recording posted on YouTube. There's nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas, being a leader of Hamas, being a fighter in Hamas, Cates said. These are the people that are on the front lines defending Palestine. Okay, so this is the organizer of the protests now, saying that they support, there's nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas, being a leader of Hamas, being a fighter in Hamas, then already that's wrong, because it's clearly proven that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and a terrorist organization should not be represented on a college campus or anywhere that supports justice. So that's what I wanted to share from this article. And I wanted to share another article, just a second here as I get it ready, from the Free Press about what went into this training. So let's go back here again. Here it is. Okay. So this is from the Free Press, also from 3 days ago. This is the Micro Intifada. American protesters are being trained in militancy. Okay? Subtitle, guides created by radical groups are teaching pro-Palestinian students to use violence on campus. Okay, so this is, anybody can get onto the free press. And but I don't pay for it. So this is the brief free version of the much longer article that would be available if you paid the subscription. Students participating in the Gaza Solidarity encampments at universities across the country are being taught to become militants according to 9 manuals obtained by the Free Press. Okay, so protesting freely is one thing. Protesting lawfully, peacefully is one thing. If you're protesting because you trained to do so in a militant fashion, that's wrong and it should be broken up. Many of the manuals which are being shared via phone group chats with students across the country encourage militancy and instruct protesters to break laws, seize buildings, vandalize them, and then use tactics to evade police detection and arrest. One guide called De-Arrest Primer teaches protesters to physically resist arrest, or in some cases assault police officers or throw projectiles at them to protect fellow comrades from arrest. Each de-arrest, the guide states, is a micro-intifada which can spread and inspire others until we may finally shake off this noxious ruling order altogether. Another manual, called the Do-It-Yourself Occupation Guide, contains detailed diagrams on how to break into buildings using tools like crowbars, clamps, metal cables, chains, bolt cutters, and a miniature saw known as an angle grinder.
Now, this sounds like January 6th.
Exactly.
The vandalizing of the building, the
Right.
breaking in police officers, it's the whole.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's what an angle grinder looks like, what bolt cutters are, crowbar. Okay. Instructions show how to barricade doors with heavy furniture, create a shield against police using trash cans, ropes, sheets of cardboard, or a corrugated metal banner, and to pick locks using a technique developed by firemen and criminals. If these less destructive methods don't work, the guide states, more aggressive options are abundant, such as using a crowbar to open a window. Okay, so a guide on how to open a locked door and break through windows. Many of these techniques were employed by Columbia students on Tuesday night when they stormed Hamilton Hall, an administrative building at the heart of the university. Protesters smashed through the windows of the hall's main door with hammers and used metal chains to lock them shut. After cops arrested 119 people on the Ivy League campus, they discovered multiple glass doors had been broken and barricaded using chairs, refrigerators, and vending machines, according to NYPD's Deputy Commissioner Tariq Shepard. 3 of the guides encouraged college protesters to erase the distinction between students and non-students. Of the 282 people arrested on Tuesday night between Columbia and the City College in New York, 48%, almost half, were not affiliated with either university, according to the NYPD. There's a movement to radicalize young people, New York City Mayor Eric Adams said at a press conference Wednesday. This is a global problem, and young people are being influenced by those who are professionals at radicalizing our children, and I'm not going to allow that to happen as the mayor of the city of New York. So this is frightening to me. Like I said all along, I encourage and I expect protests to happen almost every day on a college campus, but freely, safely, peacefully. Clearly, then, these protests, at least the one in Colombia, but we can assume that most of the protests across the country at college campuses have received the same manual that this reporter for the Free Press um, shed light on, and that has to be stopped, and we need to be aware of it. That what's happening on the college campus is not a regular college protest and not a regular campus protest. This is something else entirely, and is transforming the Israel's war against Hamas into it is desecrating what has happened there by suggesting that Hamas is a freedom fighting organization and that they represent all of the Palestinian people. Nothing, as we know, can be further from the truth. And what these protesters are doing is a distortion of truth, it's a distortion of facts, and it is against what we think college is supposed to be encouraging people to be open, to understand, to research and investigate, and to get to the truth. The fact that they're hiding the truth, the fact that they're representing some conspiracy theories and totally ignore the innocent Israelis who were killed barbarically by Hamas on October 7th, the women who were raped, the people who were tortured, totally ignored, not just by these protesters, but by other, is a shanda. I don't have any other word for it other than the Yiddish word, a shanda. It is terrible, and this is something we need to be aware of, and we need to advocate for. So I just wanted to make us aware through these two articles about what is really going on the college campus today, and let us not succumb to the easy soundbite that these are peaceful protesters. It's far from the fact, and also that they are representing truth and advocating truth. That's also far from the truth as well. Any questions or comments?
Yeah.
Yes,
I saw in the Washington Post a couple of days ago that a group of hostage families are suing in federal court the Students for Peace in Palestine,
Justice in Palestine,
and
right?
and AMR, which is another group which helps the college, the radicals on
Uh-huh.
on the basis that they're nonprofits in the state they are, and they're not supposed to have a political opinion. So I don't know how far that's going to go.
That's great. I'm
Yeah.
glad they're doing it and that they have the money to do it, because I think that going through the justice system, and so that the Department of Justice or the Supreme Court takes a stance on this to point out. I mean, just like what our synagogue did in the 80s when our synagogue was desecrated with anti-Semitic graffiti. So that our congregation had the courage and the wherewithal to take this to court and to fight it in the Supreme Court, to say that such anti-Semitic graffiti is hatred. It is so that it's great that we did that, and when that we were served as a precedent for that. And so I give the hostage families credit too. Fight in a way that it will take years to go through the legal system, but still it's important for our country to take a stance legally against hatred. So, and yeah, if this is successful, I think that that would be that's really what our country is all about, and that it highlights again. And so, it's the fact that the past president of the United States is being taken to court, I think, not from a political point of view, I think it's the right thing to do. If someone has done something illegal, no one's above the law. Okay, so that's as political as I'll be about that. But that's what our country stands for, and anything else is a perversion of justice, and a perversion of that view of what America stands for. So if the hostage families can bring about some justice through the court system, that would be more power to them. Bess.
Just want to point out that the KKK dissolved because it was being sued in court. They lost, I think it was 100 million. I don't remember the dollar amount. And that's what wiped out the KKK. Maybe this can do it in that way.
Right. Again, it is going to take time, but yes, absolutely. So again, if these hostage families have the patience and the time, and whoever is representing them has the energy to do this, then yes, more power to them. They should absolutely do that. But in the meantime, we have to find a way. We who care about truth and understand moral, ethical, religious values have to find a way to stand up against these forms of hatred that we're seeing. And I have no idea how to do that, because I don't know how to combat it on social media. And I certainly, you can write letters until your fingers are raw from typing letters to newspapers and elected officials. I don't know a better way to change people's minds, to have them see the truth, or to help them advocate for truth. So that's an incredibly frustrating thing, and that's the even more dangerous element of these college campus protests, because how much work is involved to counter them successfully.
Well,
Yes.
Dartmouth had a method, and it seems to have worked. Is everybody familiar with what Dartmouth did?
What did Dartmouth do?
Dartmouth, as soon as it started, they saw what was happening. They brought in professors from their Middle East department, Palestinian side viewpoint, Israeli, historically, with background, and all students were required, I believe. But it didn't seem it was difficult to get them to come.
Right.
And they came and they heard both sides.
Okay, so that would be great, and that's really effective. I'm just thinking practically, Dartmouth is a small campus. So it's more effective on a small campus because you have more control over the student population. A campus like Columbia or Penn, which is huge, it's a lot harder, and not all students live on campus. Imagine all the students at Dartmouth live on campus, or maybe off campus would be right next to Dartmouth. Whereas at Columbia, students don't necessarily live right there on the Upper West Side. They live all over the place. And so it's harder to have that kind of impact on the entire student body. So not saying that it's impossible, but it is, yes, there should be ways that campus authorities and leadership can find a way to organize students quickly and more effectively and lawfully and safely, rather than let it get out of hand when it's too late. So,
and also big donors to big universities have withdrawn money.
Yes, there's that too, right? Right. So yes, there are methods available, but yes, yeah. The right. So again, we see. We're not professionals. Just the six of us who are here on this call, and certainly the people who are watching this recording most likely are not professionals either. But we all hopefully are frustrated at least by what's going on, and would like to see a way in which the truth about what Hamas is, and the suffering and torture that Israelis suffered at the hand of Hamas, really people need to know about it, and we need to advocate and find a way for people to know about it. So, with that, we'll stop here for today. Thank you for being here today, and we'll see you next Monday for another Jews in the News.
Yashar, Donna. Good
Thanks.
to see everybody.
Thank you.